over half the country now receives more from the state than they pay in, it's financial collapse waiting to happen. Britain's welfare state is no longer doing what it was originally designed to do. It was built to be a safety net, temporary support to help those who need it get back onto their feet. But today it resembles something else entirely. Something psychologists call suicidal empathy. When someone tries to carry someone else's problems, sacrifices themselves in the process, and eventually burns out. And that's exactly what our welfare state, our welfare system is doing. It's become too big, too expensive, and too badly targeted to actually help the people who need it most. It's failing. Just look at the numbers. Britain now spends over £300 billion a year on welfare. More than we spend on education, on policing, on defence and transport all combined. And yet more people than ever actually feel worse off. How does that make any sense? More than half of all households receive more from the state than they actually pay into the state. There's many people who should get help, of course. They genuinely can't work. But there's also many people who absolutely could work, or could maybe work from home or do a job that is more suited to their situation, but they actually choose not to. They're choosing not to work. On top of this, nearly 500 migrants a day are signing up for benefits as claims by foreign nationals hit a record high. Last month, about 472 migrants a day began claiming universal credit, while the overall number of foreign nationals receiving it rose to nearly 1.3 million, which was an increase of about 6.7% in 1 year. So, the whole system is not sustainable, partly due to migration and partly due to British citizens choosing not to work and taking from the state more than they put in. So let's break down exactly why the system is failing. Number one, I would say there are just no boundaries. A person with suicidal empathy can't say no. Our welfare state has the exact same problem. Eligibility keeps widening, entitlement grows, governments avoid enforcing rules because it, feels too harsh. Kindness without boundaries is just simply chaotic. The second reason I would say is that the people funding the system burn out. In psychology, the overly empathetic person collapses under the weight of helping others. In Britain, the tax base collapses, and it is collapsing. Workers shoulder more, pay more, get squeezed harder, while welfare costs keep climbing. Now we have a record welfare spending, record taxes, and record dissatisfaction. Not to mention, many of the people who are actually funding this the most, the average taxpayer, the millionaires, the business owners, they're actually leaving. Britain's brain drain. And there's a whole different video that I'm planning to make, or is already filmed and up. So do make sure that you check that out if you haven't already on that topic. Number three, helping people stops helping when empathy becomes enabling. It traps people instead of supporting them. And that's exactly what's happening. Work often doesn't pay more than benefits in a lot of situations. Sickness pathways make people financially worse off if they improve. Housing support punishes anyone who gets a better job or wants to move. And like I said, in some cases, people who actually work full time end up worse off than people on benefits. And while workers are being dragged into higher taxes through frozen thresholds, benefits are actually rising nearly 4% to protect claimants from inflation. That doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, once again, workers get poorer, the system stays the same. There's many cases where people are just simply realizing that they are better off not working, so they don't. Why would you? Why would you get up early, commute in the dark and cold, work 8 to 12 hours a day, maybe even more than 5 days a week, if you get paid more just not to do that? People aren't silly, and that's exactly what they're doing. It's not right, but it's what they're doing. Number four, emotional policy making replaces outcomes. Record spending becomes a headline, as if spending more automatically means helping more. That's often not the case. But if dependency rises, employment falls, and outcomes stagnate, then this moral signalling is at the expense of the system's future. And none of this is the fault of the vulnerable people who genuinely need support. The problem is the structure, the incentives, the loopholes, and the way the system traps people instead of helping them progress. So, why isn't it working anymore? Well, first, I think the biggest thing is that the incentives are broken. Too often, taking a job leaves you no better off than staying on benefits. When work doesn't pay, people don't work. And that's not their fault. I mean, it is wrong, but it's not their fault. It's the system's fault. Second, we're not distinguishing between people who need short-term hardship and long-term dependency. For example, you can have two people in the same hard month situation. They both need help. One person then goes on to get a job, they come off benefits, they work, whatever, while the other person has long-term dependency on the state. Also, let's not forget about Labour's plan to remove the 2-child benefit cap. Good in theory, but a disaster in practice. It's another tax-funded U-turn costing billions, and apparently Rachel from accounts could lift it. But here's the reality. British women have 1.44 children on average. By the way, this is a record low, and it's lower than the replacement rate. That should scare you. So, who is this cap being lifted for? The 2-child limit is simple and fair. People shouldn't have children if they can't afford to, and other people certainly shouldn't have to pay for unlimited family size. It prevents kids being used as a cash machine, and it stops long-term dependency being rewarded. Scrapping it would do a few things. It would encourage long-term benefit dependency. It would de-incentivize work. It would give households on welfare a higher standard of living, compared to low-income working families, and it would cost around £9 billion, paid for by working households already hammered by the frozen thresholds. It's fundamentally unfair for working families who can't afford to have 2 children themselves. Third, benefits have risen faster than wages. That pushes up rent, it strains the budget, and it puts even more pressure on the taxpayers who fund the system. And the consequences of all this are obvious. Right now, around 4 million people have no obligation to look for work. Not all can, many genuinely can't. But the system barely distinguishes between severe incapacity and loosely defined conditions. So the pool of people required not to work just keeps expanding. Also, PIP claims. They have risen by 1 million. PIP should of course be for serious long-term conditions. A surge this big just suggests thresholds are too loose, or the system is being used as a long-term alternative to employment. Even the government admits that this is financially unsustainable. Unemployment is rising while vacancies stay high. That's the sign that the system is just misaligned. Work doesn't pay enough, benefits are too sticky, and job seekers aren't being moved back into employment effectively. And workers pay more tax every single year. Frozen income tax thresholds, rising council tax, higher duties, national insurance changes, cost of living up whilst tax relief stays frozen. Workers get squeezed harder without earning more. Benefits increase while wages stagnate. Benefits are inflation protected. Wages are not. So people on benefits actually maintain their purchasing power while a lot of workers just lose it. It doesn't really seem all that fair. We're building a system where the people paying for the welfare state are opting out by reducing their hours, leaving the country. The brain drain. People are fleeing the UK now in record numbers, or just giving up on the idea that hard work actually pays in Britain. That's dangerous. So how do we fix it? Well, firstly, I don't think that we should scrap the welfare state, as many people actually do need it, although it is definitely being abused right now, but it does need rebuilding from the ground up. It is not functioning correctly. To do this, a number of things should happen. Make work pay, always. A job should always leave you better off than getting benefits. Add structure and time limits in for certain benefits, not for disability and not for serious hardship, but long-term unemployment needs a path back into work. Otherwise, that's simply not going to happen. Reform housing benefits. Stop subsidising spiralling rents. Tie support to building affordable homes. Real training for real jobs. NHS, trades, logistics, tech. Shortages are everywhere. Help people train to get into those jobs. A welfare state should really be empowering people to actually get into these roles that have shortages. Another thing, crack down on fraud and abuse. This is a big one. Billions are lost each year to fake claims and undeclared work. Billions. That money should go to the people who genuinely need help, and the leftovers can be used for something else that's productive. Everyone claiming should be personally tested face to face and even tracked over the time that they need it, in my opinion. And then in terms of immigration benefits, well, that's a whole different beast in and of itself. And I'll leave that one for maybe a different video. It's its own topic entirely. If Britain wants to thrive again, the welfare system has to change, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity at this point. Support those who truly need it. Let's help those people, but let's give incentives for those who can work and a system taxpayers can actually afford. That's how you fix Britain's welfare state before it just collapses on its own, which is what's happening. I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in our weekly newsletter, we release one every single Saturday. It's completely free. It goes through everything that's happened in the UK over that past week. I think you'll like it if you like this video. I'll leave a link in the description below, and I'll see you next time.